lurid confessions of drug use, the Duke of Sussex is praying that Joe Biden will be re-elected in November. Because if Donald Trump returns to the White House, Prince Harry could be deported to Britain. That's right, folks. This is not a drill. Prince Harry could be deported to Britain in the next year or two. We'll cover that at 10. So 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. Lots to get through. Don't miss a second of the action. First, the news headlines and Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing in the next election. The filed MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations, though. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, will meet Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley tomorrow to discuss community relations. It comes as Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. The Met Police have now responded in a statement saying the Assistant Commissioner has written to Gideon Falter to offer a private meeting to apologise and to discuss what the Met can do to ensure Jewish Londoners feel safe. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Home Secretary describing it as a vital step forwards. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. And a record 50,000 people ran the London Marathon today, completing the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 a.m, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Our very own GB News political editor, Chris Hope, was one of the many who crossed the finishing line today.
Well, I've done it. I got round 26.2 miles, 5 hours, 8 minutes, a bit slower than normal for me. Had a very sore left hip at some point. That was really hard, but here's the proof, here's the medal. That's why you do these kind of things. We raised, I think, over £7,000 for Scope. I'll check on it online later. It's a great cause. It's moving, it's exhausting, and it's well worth the effort. And if you're mad like me, why not try and run it?
And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
Well done, Chopper, fresh as a daisy after 5 hours. My thanks to Sophia Wensler, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. In the big story, another crisis for Rishi Sunak, as disgraced Tory MP Mark Menzies resigns from the party and stands down at the next election. I'll get reaction from a top Westminster insider. Yet another free speech row in higher education, as it's revealed an Exeter University student was threatened with expulsion after being overheard through his bedroom wall saying that veganism is wrong and gender fluidity is stupid. One Exeter professor who wants to push back on this madness joins me live. Tonight, we will remember the late, great Queen Elizabeth II on what would have been her 98th birthday in the company of my Mark Meets guest, the Queen's favourite royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. And in my Take at 10, looking forward to this, following his lurid confessions of drug use, the Duke of Sussex is praying that Joe Biden is re-elected in November, because if Donald Trump returns to the White House, Prince Harry could be deported to Britain. Reacting to the big stories of the day, Michael Crick, Linda Jubilee, and yes, a member of the House of Lords that has some common sense, Lord Colville Ranger. Plus, the most important part of the show, your views. They come straight to my laptop. gbnews.com/your say. This show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. Don't miss a second of the action. And we start with my big opinion. Like a stubborn case of chlamydia, the Angela Rayner story just won't go away. And I'm itching to tell you more. In what feels like day 377 of this political drama, I fear that we'll still be talking about this in decades to come. We'll still be speculating long after the conclusion of World War III. It will still be a hot topic after the nuclear apocalypse. And when the aliens finally land on planet Earth, even they will be wondering whether Angela Rayner lived on Vicarage Road or Lowndes Road in 2015. Now, many people say that the sum involved, capital gains tax of just over £1,000, is trivial. They are right. Many people say there are bigger problems facing the country: the cost of living, bloated and inefficient public services, sky-high rents, energy bills, debt, crime. They are right. Many say it is a political witch hunt against a prominent left-wing politician, a working-class woman who has worked hard herself and made something of her life. Well, maybe they are right. So why does this matter? Why won't the story go away? Because of the impression, rightly or wrongly, that the woman who would be our next Deputy Prime Minister is hiding something and not being straight with the public. And this is surely a qualification that's required for high office. Rayner herself has been enthusiastic in her hounding down of public figures like Boris Johnson. She said he couldn't possibly remain Prime Minister whilst under investigation. The story won't go away because Angela Rayner won't kill it. So how could she kill it? Well, she just has to publish the legal advice that she was given, which Labour say confirms she did nothing wrong. But she won't publish. Why? If it exonerates her, why not? And her boss, Sir Keir Starmer, hasn't seen this legal advice. Now, he's a top lawyer and the leader of the opposition. He says he doesn't want to see the advice. He doesn't need to see it. He hasn't seen it. Perhaps Keir Starmer is not a big reader. I'm more than happy for Angela Rayner to send me that legal advice, and maybe I can sit down, perhaps at bedtime, and read the legal advice to Sir Keir Starmer over a cup of cocoa. Do you see the problem? Well, the Mail on Sunday definitely do, because they have not let this story go. In recent weeks, they've reported a testimony from a former neighbour called Sylvia Hampson, who will swear on the Bible that Rayner lived at one address, not the other. The paper have trawled through social media posts and reported that Rayner's former top advisor has contradicted his former boss's account. And today, the Mail on Sunday, like a dog with a bone and more XL bully than Chihuahua, report that the aforementioned ex-neighbour Sylvia Hampson, who has previously called the Labour deputy leader an effing liar about this, has confirmed that she was a legal witness to the sale of Rayner's home. The Mail on Sunday report that Rayner asked Mrs Hampson to sign the document unearthed by the paper for what she claimed was her principal property, even though her neighbour lived a mile away next door to the Labour number 2's then husband, where she says she wasn't living. Confused? You should be. Now, the police investigation is ongoing and we must have due process. Rayner has said she will step down if a crime has been committed. Some of the accusations are hearsay and they may be politically motivated. Many prominent Tories have got up to far worse in the past. Angela Rayner has always protested her innocence, explaining that she has legal advice exonerating her. And as far as anyone is concerned, she has acted properly and has no case to answer. Angela Rayner could well be as innocent as a night out with Mary Berry. But until this normally very upfront politician is upfront about the story, the whole story, it's not going to go away. Yes, folks, there are more unanswered questions than Wayne Rooney on Mastermind, which is why this is an unwelcome distraction for Angela Rayner and her boss, Sir Keir Starmer, who has unequivocally backed his deputy. Angela Rayner could so easily kill this story, but she won't. Why? Any alleged wrongdoing is minor, but that's not the point. This is about being straight. It's about honesty. It's about the truth. We need to know which property really was Angela Rayner's home sweet home. But all we've been given is Sweet FA. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. But first, my top pundits this evening. We have journalist and author Michael Crick, no less. Member of the House of Lords, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coulvier-Ranger. And a very old friend of mine, journalist and communications advisor, the one and the only Linda Jubilee. Can I tell you, it's taking me longer and longer to get across that studio, Michael Crick. I'm starting to show my age. I'd call it metal fatigue. Not like you, you're like a brand new Boeing. Michael, your reaction to this story, it won't go away, and for good reason.
It won't go away. The things Angela Rayner is accused of are relatively trivial. If she'd had any sense, she would have sent a cheque to the HMRC for £3,000 or something, and that probably would have killed it. People, the electoral register thing, I mean, I did a story about John Major years ago doing worse than that. I did a story about Paul Nuttall, the UKIP leader, doing worse than that. But what it shows is the inadequacies of both Rayner and Starmer. And when Starmer says it would be inappropriate to look at the legal advice, what complete rubbish. Find me a decent lawyer in the kingdom who agrees with that. Why is it inappropriate? If I was the boss of a company and one of my senior executives had got into trouble like this and said they had legal advice, the first thing I'd say is, well, bring me the legal advice. And it makes everybody think that the legal advice is less than 100% supportive. It's also important for three other reasons. And I'm sorry if I'm stealing all my colleagues' points. First...
Enjoy the spotlight.
First, Starmer...
Michael Crick tonight.
First, one of Starmer's selling points is that here we have a man of integrity, former DPP, his chief of staff, former cabinet ethics advisor, and yet they cannot handle this story properly. Second, housing. Major issue for a party like Labour, a party that has struggled over the years to decide what it thinks about the right to buy council houses. And third, one of the few ways in which Labour plan to make money for the Treasury, although I'm pretty sceptical about it, is by cracking down further on tax avoidance and tax evasion. So this story is going to come up again and again and again until they sort it out.
She's, I think, foolish. I think there's a mistake how Labour are handling this because, as you say, any indiscretion is going to be minor. She said she'll stand down if she's done anything criminal. That's unlikely to be the case. Is this partly a political witch hunt, though? Is this woman being picked on because she's left-wing, she's working class?
There is an element of... clearly, of course, there's an element of witch hunt about it, and the Conservatives have gone big on it. But, I mean, I'm not a Conservative, but one can hardly blame them, given how much Angela Rayner went big on them over all the things that Boris Johnson did. And that's the problem with our modern politics.
You were famous, and are famous for your guerrilla journalism at Newsnight and Channel 4 News. If you were currently at one of those networks, would you be doorstepping Angela Rayner in regard to this story?
I'd be doorstepping Angela Rayner, but I'd also be doorstepping Keir Starmer. In fact, I'd probably be doorstepping him more than her. OK. Well,
listen, Coulvier-Ranger, the bottom line is that Angela Rayner has made clear she's done nothing wrong. There's a police investigation. The boss, Keir Starmer, is happy. The legal advice is sound. She said, you know, she'll stand down if anything criminal has happened. Nothing to see here.
Well, it doesn't feel that way because we know there's an investigation going on at the moment, and there are more questions to be answered. And we hear this drip feed of information coming through about neighbours and others. And
the formidable Sylvia Hampson.
Yes, who will become a household name, no doubt, by the time this ends.
Who is no shrinking violet at the age of 83.
It sounds that way from her colourful language as well. But I think the issue also here for Angela Rayner as a politician is before this issue, we were hitting peak Angela Rayner. She had really built up a lot of political capital to the point where, you know, Sir Keir Starmer has to hold her quite close. She is the equivalent of two Jags Prescott for Tony Blair was for him. She is two houses Rayner now, but she brings our working class credibility to a leader who slightly lacks it. She gives that breadth to the Labour Party. He needs Angela Rayner politically. So whether he wants to see the legal advice, whether he wants to see her damaged through this issue, which it could be relatively minor in scale of things, but it's beginning to fester because they haven't dealt with it because she was at peak Rayner and they thought maybe they could just move on. And I think that's going to be a fundamental learning for this Labour Party if they get into power. And there's a big if there. There is a general issue. This is the kind of thing you have to deal with well. And it's something that the Conservatives haven't been dealing with well in government in the latter couple of years.
Or, Linda Jubilee, is this a sort of classic sort of Tory witch hunt and also witch hunt on the part of the right-wing press?
Well, what I do know, and I was a staff reporter on the Mail on Sunday, is now that they're started down this path, they won't give up. They absolutely won't.
But isn't that because they don't have anything? They're grasping at straws.
And the problem is they might not find anything. So I can draw a parallel between a story I covered actually for ATV on Tony Blair and whether or not he had his son Leo Blair inoculated against MMR, right? I stuck with that day in, day out, literally day in, day out, for weeks, and I could never copper bottom it.
Yeah.
Now, and this morning, the programme was running every morning. Day 1, no answer on Leo. Day 2, no answer on Leo. Day 3. It went on for hundreds of days, and no one ever found out whether that child was inoculated. Now, I doubt that he was inoculated at 13 months. I think it's probably nearer 4 years old by the time he had the injection.
Right.
But there's a direct parallel here that once you know you're in a position that you can hold on and not say something, like the Blairs and like Keir Starmer, whatever you think of his handling it, he's not saying anything and he's going to keep his mouth shut. And on the other hand of that axis, you've got the Mail on Sunday, who will not give up.
OK, well, look, does this story matter? Is it important? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Coming up next in the big story, another crisis for Rishi Sunak as disgraced Tory MP Mark Menzies resigns from the party and stands down at the next election. I'll get reaction from a top Westminster insider. That's next.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
There is a kind of a Mediterranean side to that as well, because my mother came from that side, you know, a big family. And I think there is that sense of community where family is kind of key. And I think that's really kind of what we sort of try and continue, really. I mean, certainly with children and stuff like that, you know, Sunday lunches were always, you know, the big thing.
Yeah,
really.
But if you go down the Old Kent Road today...
Very different. Very different, yeah. And that was quite some time ago as well, because we were very close to where the Thomas à Becket was.
Yeah, I know. I know, the boxing upstairs and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I did go down there not so long ago, actually, and it really is very, very different. I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think we have a different view of things.
Most people in London, Nicky, don't even know the names of the next-door neighbours.
No, true.
We've completely lost that sense of community that you grew up with, that you knew. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say sometimes I'm a bit guilty of it where I am now as well. You live in big houses, and I do see my neighbours, but, you know, it's not quite the same as it was back.
Now, I guess from that background, you were a teenager, you want to become a hairdresser.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a difficult call.
Yeah, that one was a really good call. My dad went, oh, God, what? I mean, it was just very funny. And certainly from the point of view of, you know, this was the early 70s. So it wasn't really the choice of most people would do.
No, but you did. Why?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I went to a grammar school and I didn't do as well in the final exams, and I was kind of forced into sort of leaving. And you suddenly go, ooh, no idea what to do here, really.
Yeah.
But the idea of doing something in fashion, and, you know, I really kind of... I know that I was given some really good advice, actually, by somebody that said, just start at the bottom. Don't necessarily go to, you know, college or whatever. There may not be anything wrong with those, but just start at the bottom, go to the best place you can and start sweeping the floor.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
More unanswered questions for Angela Rayner. I think it matters. That was the topic of my big opinion. Well, a strong reaction at gbnews.com/your say, coming in thick and fast. How about this? Yes, this issue 100% matters, says Jenny. This is about honesty and integrity, and it's about Rayner hypocrisy. It's an offence to register to vote at an address that you do not live at. Of course, I should say, Jenny, that Angela Rayner denies that allegation. Megan says, Mark, the point is that Labour want to raise taxes for all sorts of social projects, yet Rayner can't even pay for her own earpods. And last but not least, at this stage, Simon. Good evening, Simon. Simon says, hi, Mark. Of course, the Rayner story is important. It goes to the heart of hers and Sir Flip-Flop's integrity, both of which are in serious doubt. Well, keep those opinions coming. gbnews.com/your say. And it's time now for the big story and another major headache for Rishi Sunak, as Mark Menzies, the MP facing allegations of misusing campaign funds, has quit the Conservative Party today and says he won't stand at the next general election. This announcement follows claims reported by the Times newspaper earlier this week that Menzies had used political donations to cover significant medical expenses and to pay off so-called bad people who had reportedly locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. The backbench MP for Fylde in Lancashire disputes the allegations but was suspended from the Tory party in Parliament whilst an investigation took place. Well, it's a massive story. Let's get reaction from the political editor of the Daily Express Online, David Maddox. David, Rishi Sunak must be sat there in his office in number 10 thinking, why do I bother?
You've got to feel sorry for him sometimes, actually. I have to say, he's really been dealt a bad hand in some respects. I mean, this hot on the heels of a William Ragg scandal as well, another Lancashire MP, where actually the Conservative Party are facing a real fight to hold on to the seats they've got up there in the Northwest. It's an underplayed story, but you know, I wrote about Mark on Friday, not long after the Times allegations broke, and it's a sad story for me. I remember Mark back in 2010. I was a new journalist in the lobby, working for the Scotsman at the time. He was elected in that May election. He was on their A list. He was seen as a future star. He was one of the only 7 the newly elected ones immediately put onto the kind of junior ministerial rung of PPSs. He was going to be, he seemed to be kind of flying high. I knew him very well. In fact, the funny thing was that the Scottish Labour guys were getting quite wound up about this working class Scot from the west of Scotland and, trying to get him to join them at some point, saying, you're going to come back to the fold. But clearly it's all gone wrong. He's never done more than PBS. This is not the first set of allegations he's faced either. And, you just wonder in the back of his mind, he gave up a very, very successful career in retail to switch into politics all those years back. He must be wondering if really it was worth it in the end. But this is a big problem, though, for Sunak, and it's not just about Mark Menzies. It's not just about William Ragg. It really goes way back to the problems of selection in the Conservative Party, which continue to this day. And I'm kind of interested what Michael Crick's going to think about this as well, because he's been doing some great work on the party selections. And, there's something badly wrong with the selection process, especially in the Conservative Party.
Most definitely. Well, Michael Crick is chomping at the bit to attack that story and will be doing so at 10:30 with tomorrow's papers. David, are these scandals a uniquely Conservative problem? Are the Tories institutionally sleazy?
No, they're not. And there's plenty of really good MPs and really good people there. And, I deal with them every day. And there are Labour MPs, there have been SNP MPs, and there have been Liberal Democrats in my time in Parliament caught up in these sorts of issues. The problem, it's a dual problem. It comes down to the faulty selection process, which I think Richard Tice, funny enough, has been really put his finger on it earlier today. I saw him say, you know, they're going after mediocre people who are not going to challenge them, and they're not really properly testing these people. They're not really going for the best people at all, and it's you know, but there's a problem as well with Parliament itself, I think, and when these individuals go off the rails, there's no support network. There's no way really to kind of keep them on track, and it goes very badly wrong. And it's not a Conservative problem alone. It affects all the main parties.
There are wrong uns of all political colours in the House of Commons, and as you said, many good MPs too, from all parties. In fact, the vast majority, I think, work very hard and do a good job. I'm sure you'd bear that out, David. Listen, clock's against us. I want to power through a couple of other quick questions whilst I've got you. First of all, can we talk about Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, who it's been reported wants the PM to go to the country in the summer? What's your reading of the situation?
I think there's some truth in it. I'm not sure if it's Oliver or just other people in Downing Street who he's listening to. This argument came up earlier in the year when he was being pressured to go for May the 2nd. Now, again, I ran a story a while back saying that they were going to press the button on that and go for May the 2nd, have the general election on the same day as the local elections. And it was only a last-minute threat from a whole load of Tory MPs saying we'll put in letters and have a leadership contest if you try this, that stopped it. Now, that may well happen again if they try a summer election, because, frankly, the same problem is going to happen. They are miles behind in the polls. They're going to get less than 100 seats unless something dramatically changes. And we put that in context, that's one, you know, that is half of their very worst historic result. In 1906 or 1997, they had two when they got 150 odd, and it's going to be much, much worse than that. If they go early, they've got to hope something comes along, and they need to buy themselves time. And I suspect if he goes for a summer election, it's going to cause him all sorts of problems.
It is, finally, David, kitchen sink time for the Tories. So is the political equivalent of the kitchen sink those flights to Rwanda?
I think it is. I think it's the flights to Rwanda. They have to get back to work. If they don't, it will be an enormous political failure. And I think that's why the Lords are trying to stop it from the bill from going through. I think there's a definite political game being played there. But he also needs one more, in my view, this is, he needs one more kind of fiscal event, we say, which is basically a version of a budget. And he needs to go and cut some taxes, because otherwise, there's literally nothing for the Tory MPs to knock the doors on about in whenever the election is.
David, before we go, you're in the news, and actually you're about to have your own fiscal event, because you've just been headhunted by one of the great brands in Fleet Street. You're leaving the Daily Express, where you've been a brilliant political editor online. What's your news? Where are you going?
So I'm going to the Independent as of the 1st of May. It's the day before the local elections. It's nicely timed. It's going to be a bit of a change of scene, change of politics. But it was time for me to move on. I've had 8.5 fantastic years at the Express. You know, the Express was the original Brexit paper. We got Brexit done in my time. We made sure it happened, and now it's time for a change and a kind of fresh perspective.
Well, listen, I love reading The Express, but I've got to say I can't wait to see your stuff in The Independent as well. The Independent's a great paper, very balanced, and you'll be starting at the beginning of March. So really good luck with the new job. And next time we speak, you will be the political editor of The Independent newspaper. Congratulations, David. Next up, yet another free speech row in higher education, as it's revealed. You won't believe this story. An Exeter University student, just a young boy doing his degree, was threatened with expulsion after being overheard through his bedroom wall saying that veganism is wrong and gender fluidity is stupid. By the way, I agree with both of those things. Well, one Exeter professor who wants to push back on this madness joins me live. That's right, we're going to Exeter University next to hear what's going on. See you in 2.
Good good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a drier end to the weekend for many of us today, it looks like change is on the way. An area of low pressure situated out to the north of the UK brings some weak frontal systems that will slowly sink their way southwards, particularly into the start of the new working week. And that area of high pressure we've seen pushes away towards the northwest. So a cloudy end to the day for much of eastern Scotland and northern England as that rain continues to sink its way southwards overnight. So quite a cloudy picture quite across the board into the early hours of Monday morning. But southeastern parts of England still holding on to some clearer skies, and we could even see some frost here, although not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain, and particularly across parts of Scotland holding up into the high single figures. So a cloudier start for many of us on Monday, particularly compared to what we saw over the weekend, and this rain continues to spread its way southwards through Monday daytime, not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a grey and damp day compared to the recent couple of days. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. I'm feeling warm here with highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely feeling much chillier across much of England and Wales under all that cloud and rain. That cloud and rain does eventually clear its way towards the southeast to start on Tuesday, so there will be some brighter spells, particularly for the northern half of the UK. Plenty of sunshine around through the morning. 1 or 2 showers bubbling up through the afternoon, particularly along some North Sea coastal regions, and staying quite cloudy in the southeast through the afternoon. Further showers on their way through Wednesday and Thursday, but hints of low pressure returning as we head towards the second half of the week.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'll be dealing with Prince Harry at 10 o'clock. In no uncertain terms, you won't want to miss it. He is very worried about Donald Trump becoming president. Find out why at 10. The Mail on Sunday newspaper have today revealed that a philosophy student overheard through the wall of his bedroom saying veganism is wrong and gender fluidity is stupid, was threatened with expulsion by his university. Robert Ivinson said he was disciplined after a student next door in his halls of residence at Exeter University heard the comments and then complained that he'd been offensive and transphobic. Mr. Ivinson, who expressed the views in a phone call to a friend, was hauled before university officials and put on a behavioural contract for the rest of his studies. He was warned he could be expelled if the university thought he'd done anything else wrong, and told by letter he had been found guilty of harassment. Let me just repeat those 2 things he said, that veganism is wrong and that gender fluidity is nonsense or silly. Let's get reaction from someone at Exeter University, senior lecturer in philosophy and free speech campaigner, Dr. Edward Skidelsky. Dr. Skidelsky, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has happened on your campus. It's a brilliant university, Exeter Uni. What is your reaction?
Well, I was a tutor of Rob's in 2018, and he actually came to me with this story not long after it happened, and I was shocked. I had thought that something like this couldn't happen in England, a supposedly free democratic country, and it was really this incident more than anything else that prompted me to set up what later became the Committee for Academic Freedom to campaign for free speech on British universities.
Well, indeed, let me reiterate that Exeter University is a venerated academic institution with a long history and incredible campus. It's massive. It's hugely oversubscribed. You've got to get A star times 100 to get in. But what about this idea that these comments were overheard from this young man's private bedroom and then reported to the authorities? What's your appraisal of the student that did that?
I think it's extraordinary. When I was growing up, eavesdropping was considered a bad thing to do, and then snitching on someone was considered to be even worse. But I think it's now seen as part of being a good citizen, a good ally. There's been a real shift in the culture. So I think it's awful that she did it, but it's even worse that the university took the complaint seriously and pursued it.
Do you have any idea then, as you said, you know this chap, but what he's been through personally?
Yeah, it was extremely distressing for him. I urged him at the time to challenge it, to go public with it. He said no, he just wanted to lie low and forget all about it. And it's only now, 5 years later, that he's finally, to his credit, decided to go public with it.
Now, we've approached Exeter University for comment. We await a response. As I said, it's a good university, but are you concerned about the culture at Exeter? I mean, do you think this kind of witch hunt is ongoing?
I think things have got better, actually, since then. I mean, by the way, this is an exceptional case. Things like this don't happen all the time, but they do happen, and they shouldn't really happen at all. I think what's happened is that we've become very oversensitive to causing offence. We think that students need to be protected against views that might possibly cause them distress or mental harm, where, of course, that's not the point of being at university at all. You should be exposed to views that you strongly disagree with and that may upset you.
Well, indeed, a university should be a place where you debate ideas, you go in with an open mind. But it's a concern, isn't it? A lot of universities in the grip of this so-called woke culture or extreme political correctness, where you have to subscribe to a set of often controversial beliefs like gender ideology or critical race theory. Now, these ideas may be valid, but they shouldn't be obligatory, should they?
No, absolutely not. There should be no obligatory views in a university or anywhere else. Everything should be up for debate. Of course, I do think universities have a right to regulate offensive speech. I mean, people insulting each other. But nothing that Rob did in his room was remotely offensive. The fact that someone chose to be offended by it is a completely different matter. Anyone can be offended by anything if they're sensitive enough.
Yeah, well, I doubt the vegans complained. They've barely got the energy. Let's bring in my top pundits. Do stay with us if you can, Edward. I'm delighted to have TV news legend Michael Crick, the brilliant journalist and fantastic communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and Lord Coulvier Ranger. Coulvier, your reaction to this. Did you go to university, Coulvier?
I did go to university, and I'm glad the walls of the halls I were in, which were built probably in the 40s or 50s.
Well, the thing is, I'm wondering what we would have heard through the walls of your dormitory. I doubt it's words, but just sounds, Coulvier.
Mainly of me snoring, probably, Mark. I spent time sleeping in my room and a bit of time in the library. But I think the issue here is the culture. What kind of culture says that people can dob on people by listening at their private conversation, not in the same room as them, not being addressed directly so they could take specific offence by whatever was being said, but overhearing. And I think that is something to be quite concerned about, is a light way of putting it, and then also the university reinforcing that behaviour by punishing the individual involved. I think that also set a tone that is acceptable. The acceptability of saying, yes, you can listen to someone's private conversation through a wall, dob them in, and they will take the rap for it. So I hear that Exeter University may have changed its position on this, or maybe we look to hear what their comment will be. But that is concerning in any environment if that's happening. People listening at doors and looking to find things that people might or might not be saying, and then basically holding them to account to it in the court of public opinion.
Linda, I've got no doubt that a course on Edward's philosophy degree is worth every penny, but you have to wonder why young people are getting themselves in debt in order to live under 3 or 4 years of intellectual tyranny.
It's extraordinary. It's like something out of a Franz Kafka novel. This whole idea of people being spied upon this way during a time of life when, and I think everyone's saying they should be exposed to views. Our guest was saying we should be exposed to different views, exposed to different cultures, and we should be able to take these in the spirit of which they're intended. We shouldn't be clamping down on things. It's almost irrelevant that it's veganism or whatever.
Yeah.
You're coming out with a view, you're underpinning it, presumably, and you should be allowed to say it. The second issue is that no one should be listening at walls and listening at doors so that they can snitch on you to the authorities. I'm really, really surprised that Exeter University, you know, it's a Russell Group university, really highly thought of, handled the whole matter in this way. It's extraordinary that this young man was put through this and the university authorities did not think to handle it in a better, more appropriate way.
OK, I mean, Michael Crick, you've probably got 3 or 4 degrees. Perhaps this student was deeply offended. We don't know the full details of the case. Other remarks may have been overheard which were profoundly disturbing. Why shouldn't she complain? Her safety is a factor too.
Well, she's entitled to complain, I suppose, but the university were utterly stupid in the response, as described, that they delivered. Fortunately, there's a new vice-chancellor now, so it's all 5 years ago. But, you know, universities are in deep, deep trouble right now, deep financial trouble. I think it's only going to be a matter of months before some universities start going bankrupt because the student fee hasn't gone up for nearly 10 years. They're increasingly dependent on foreign students. The universities need public opinion on their side to persuade whoever is the next party in government that the universities need help from that government. And if they do stupid things like this, and we've seen other cases like at Sussex University, they are not going to win over public opinion. It may well be that the students at Exeter, because they are of a different generation, feel this was perfectly justified. I don't know. It's quite possible. But I think the general public will be horrified.
Now, absolutely. Look, we're waiting to hear back from the University of Exeter. I do know that their pastoral care is second to none, and I've got no doubt that when they heard this complaint, they were doing their very best to address the complaint made and to follow due process. I'm sure they tried their best to handle the situation, although it appears to have backfired, at least on the face of it. Dr. Skidelsky, you get the closing thoughts. Can you tell me a bit about your campaign and how people can find out more about your aims and goals?
Yes, we're the Committee for Academic Freedom. We set up last year. We aim to highlight abuses and threats to freedom in UK universities. We run a regular blog. We make regular podcasts, including one with Rob Ivanson, the student in this particular case. Do look us up. Sign our principles if you're a UK academic. We're completely non-partisan. We report on threats from both the right and the left. This needs emphasising now when everyone thinks that free speech is an evil right-wing plot. We're not. So please support us.
That's right. Just Google a Committee for Academic Freedom and all of that treasure trove of excellent work will appear on your laptop. Dr. Skidelsky, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to catching up in the near future. More power to you.
Thank you, Mark.
OK, folks, lots more to get through. Don't forget, I'll be dealing with Prince Harry in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock. And it's a lively one, let me tell you. But next up, my Mark Meets guest. It's a very special guy, too. He is the late, great Queen Elizabeth II's favourite royal photographer. Elizabeth would have been 98 today, and we'll celebrate the great lady next. Plus, let me tell you, we've been conducting an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've been asking if he wins the US presidential election, should Donald Trump deport Prince Harry back to Britain? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, you know, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same. It's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash talked back? To stand up and say, you know, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy. If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to, you know?
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this interview in the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry. I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is all about your feedback. We've been running an exclusive People's poll. We've been asking if he wins the US presidential election, should Donald Trump deport Prince Harry back to Britain? Well, the results are in, and 55.7% say no, but a whacking 44.3% say yes, send him home. Well, let me tell you, Trump versus Harry is the topic of my Take at 10 at 10 o'clock. It's lively. You won't want to miss it. First, Mark Meets. Today is April the 21st, which sees the birthday of the late, great Queen Elizabeth II, who would have turned 98 today if she was still with us. To remember a truly remarkable monarch and a remarkable lady, I'm delighted to welcome royal photographer and writer Ian Lloyd, who covered more than 500 of the Queen's engagements. Having written a bestseller about Prince Philip called The Duke, his latest offering is simply entitled The Queen, 70 Chapters in the Life of Elizabeth II. Ian Lloyd, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Hello, Mark. Nice to talk to you.
Well, it's great to have you. Any excuse to talk about that amazing lady. Your reflections on the Queen's birthday, what are your lingering memories of Elizabeth?
Wow, so many. I mean, for a start, if she was around, she wouldn't be celebrating. She hated her birthday. It was unlike her mum, who the Queen Mother absolutely milked it. She had a great, fantastic birthday every August when the whole country seemed to descend on London, and she made several appearances over the day. She absolutely adored it. The Queen hated that kind of thing. She tried to avoid it. And when she had an 80th and a 90th birthday at Windsor, they had to sort of encourage her to sort of make it larger. She just said, oh, I'll just make an appearance. They said, well, can't you just go around the streets a bit, sort of thing. She was very, very reluctant to celebrate it. She was a very modest person, and I think I always thought she was a very ordinary person in an extraordinary situation, but not like a mother, of course. She was
in your book, you write about the fact that, yes, she was amazingly frugal and quite a mimic as well. Tell me more.
Well, she could, mimic a lot of people. I mean, sad thing is, she was such a private person. There's two sides to the public side and then the private side. And the great thing is we don't know anything really about the private side, so we have to rely on a few sources.
Yeah.
But she was apparently a very good mimic. She could mimic, or she was known to mimic Boris Yeltsin, Neil Kinnock, Concord taking off. The Dean of Windsor said she did a good because she was on Concord. Ian Paisley, she did. And oddly, her own sister, Princess Margaret, because the funny thing is the Queen, as she got older, went a bit more estuary. She went less, sort of formal. Princess Margaret went a bit more plummy as she got older, so the Queen would imitate her sister. And then famously, she imitated a Cockney woman who the Queen was driving into the gates of Buckingham Palace, and this woman said, "Oh, she ain't like her pictures, is she?" And the Queen heard that and thought that was really funny.
Listen, you've written about her in this lovely new book. You are a royal writer, but you were a photographer of the royals as well. Some have said that you were her favourite snapper.
No.
Is that not true?
That's absolute rubbish. I mean, the great thing with the Queen is she was totally inscrutable. She never said who was her, favourite artist, favourite biographer, whatever it was. There's a story of her going to see a documentary, a royal documentary, and she had to see a preview to sort of okay it. And then afterwards they said, "Would you like to stay for tea, Mum?" She said, "Oh yes, I think I'll have a cup of tea. That'd be lovely." And afterwards the director said to her private secretary, "Well, do you think she liked it?" And he said, "Well, she must have done because she stayed for tea." I mean, she would never say she liked it, but the very fact she stayed and didn't rush away suggested she liked it. And that's how she was. I mean, when she unveiled a painting of herself, she never said, "Oh, what a wonderful painting." She always left the artist hanging, thinking, have I done a good job? And one artist told me that he painted her, and she just looked at it and said, "That would make a good stamp." And, that was the best he could get out of her.
Damning with faint praise. She kept her counsel very wise. Did she like having her photograph taken? Was she a comfortable subject?
I wouldn't say so. Her mother, again, milked it, Queen Mum, but the Queen, she endured it. She didn't really feel at ease with the press. She once stopped me in Windsor. I was at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, and I had this massive camera with a big lens, and it was lying on the grass, and she pulled up in this Land Rover in front of me, and she said, "You'd better move that lens because I'd hate to run over it," which seemed to imply that she'd quite like to run over it. But, she just endured the press, and particularly in the 80s and 90s, it got very silly with all the Diana things, and every time, they were at Sandringham or Balmoral, there'd be press hanging around in the trees and all that kind of thing, trying to photograph them going riding, and she didn't like it, but she endured it. I think that's the word.
There's so much in the book. You quote Princess Margaret, her sister, who spoke about a sense of magic when Elizabeth walked into a room. What did she mean by that?
She said, "I get enormously impressed when she walks into a room," because the thing is with the Queen, she had impact. I mean, you never got tired of seeing her. She was one of those people that could, generate an atmosphere. Back in the 80s, the photographers of the day all had to think of an adjective to sum up each member of the royal family. And, Queen Mother was a darling and all that. But the Queen, the word was awesome. And she really was awesome. You got full of awe when she walked into a room. I met her at a press reception when she went to Russia. And all the legendary Fleet Street reporters and photographers of the day covered that trip. And we got to meet her at this reception. And I remember we were told to line up outside. And I looked over my shoulder, and these people like Anne Leslie from the Daily Mail and people like that, there was a queue of about 50. And I looked over, and everybody had morphed back into being little kids at school.
I can imagine it. Let me plug the book, Ian. It is called The Queen, 70 Chapters in the Life of Elizabeth II. It's out now. Ian, do come back and talk royal stuff with us in the future. Next up in My Take at 10, Prince Harry. See you in 2.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a drier end to the weekend for many of us today, it looks like change is on the way. An area of low pressure situated out to the north of the UK brings some weak frontal systems that will slowly sink their way southwards, particularly into the start of the new working week. And that area of high pressure we've seen pushes away towards the northwest. So a cloudy end to the day for much of eastern Scotland and northern England as that rain continues to sink its way southwards overnight. So quite a cloudy picture quite across the board into the early hours of Monday morning. But southeastern parts of England still holding on to some clearer skies, and we could even see some frost here, although not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain, and particularly across parts of Scotland holding up into the high single figures. So a cloudier start for many of us on Monday, particularly compared to what we saw over the weekend, and this rain continues to spread its way southwards through Monday daytime, not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a grey and damp day compared to the recent couple of days. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. I'm feeling warm here with highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely feeling much chillier across much of England and Wales under all that cloud and rain. That cloud and rain does eventually clear its way towards the southeast to start on Tuesday, so there will be some brighter spells, particularly for the northern half of the UK. Plenty of sunshine around through the morning. 1 or 2 showers bubbling up through the afternoon, particularly along some North Sea coastal regions, and staying quite cloudy in the southeast through the afternoon. Further showers on their way through Wednesday and Thursday, but hints of low pressure returning as we head towards the second half of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. Following his lurid confessions of drug use, the Duke of Sussex is praying that Joe Biden is re-elected in November. Because if Donald Trump returns to the White House, Prince Harry could be deported to Britain. Is Sir Keir Starmer right to say that Labour are now the party of patriotism? And why are universities turning their backs on St George's Day? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, Anne Widdicombe. Plus, in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, the leading travel firm who have gone against the advice of the government to offer British Muslims package holidays in Iraq, Iran and Afghanistan. I'll be unearthing that scandal in The Last Word before 11. So, a packed show, lots to get through. Prince Harry versus Donald Trump, that's in 2 minutes' time. But first, the news headlines and Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story. Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing at the next election. The filed MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, will meet Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley tomorrow to discuss community relations. It comes as Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. The Met Police have now responded in a statement saying the Assistant Commissioner has written to Gideon Falter to offer a private meeting to apologise. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion of aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forwards. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. And a record 50,000 people ran the London Marathon today, completing the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 a.m. this morning, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Our very own GB News political editor, Chris Hope, was one of the many who crossed the finishing line today.
Well, I've done it. I got round 26.2 miles, 5 hours, 8 minutes, a bit slower than normal for me. Had a very sore left hip at some point. That was really hard, but here's the proof, here's the medal. That's why you do these kind of things. We raised, I think, over £7,000 for Scope. I'll check on it online later. It's a great cause. It's moving, it's exhausting, and it's well worth the effort. And if you're mad like me, why not try and run it?
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
Well done, Chopper. Barely broke a sweat. And thank you to Sophia Wensler, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan Tonight. Is Sir Keir Starmer right to say that Labour are now the party of patriotism? And why are universities turning their backs on St George's Day? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, Anne Widdicombe. Plus, in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, you won't believe this story. The leading travel firm who have gone against government advice to offer British Muslims package holidays in Iraq, Iran and Afghanistan. Plus, reacting to the big stories of the day. My top pundits this evening talk about pedigree, Linda Jubilee, Coolvia Ranger and Michael Crick. Plus, they'll be reacting to tomorrow's front pages. A packed hour. Anne Widdicombe is waiting in the wings. She's not happy. But first, my take at 10. There are lots of people praying for a Joe Biden victory in November. Champagne socialist Hollywood celebrities, a sizable portion of the US media, and most notably, King Charles's youngest son, Prince Harry. Why? Well, because if the establishment nemesis Donald Trump prevails in November, Prince Harry could be thrown out of the country. The Sussex's business model, which is to make their lives a commodity, to sell their privacy to the highest bidder and to make oversharing an industry, is coming back to bite them on the royal bottom. There was the outrageous Oprah Winfrey interview in which they effectively accused Harry's family of racism. There was the podcast in which Harry criticised his father's parenting skills. And even the peerless Princess Catherine has been characterised as a less-than-perfect sister-in-law by sources close to the Sussexes. And most egregiously, there was that rotten book Spare. 300 pages of self-indulgence, self-aggrandisement and self-pity. In the book, Queen Camilla was described figuratively as dangerous and a villain. The details of a fight between Harry and his brother William, which should have stayed in those four walls, became a global story. Harry risked the safety of former military colleagues and his own family by boasting that he killed several Taliban fighters. The book may have been called Spare, but could easily have been called TMI. Too much information, as every detail of his life, every innermost thought, every private conversation was handed to the publishers in exchange for a bag of gold.
It was like that. Like, I curtsied as though I was like... Pleasure to meet you, Your Majesty. Like, was that okay?
Do you remember that debacle? Harry has made millions from shows like that. That, of course, was the Netflix series in which Meghan Markle mocked Queen Elizabeth. This guy's made a fortune from chat show appearances, podcasts, and that best-selling book. But it has come at a huge price. Once the most popular royal in the country, he's now jostling with his Uncle Andrew at the bottom of the Windsor League table. He has saddened his father, enraged his brother, and doubtless gave his late grandmother sleepless nights as she wondered what might be in that book and whether it would damage the family and the monarchy to which she devoted her life. It's a hell of a thing to sell your family down the river, your blood relatives. They're bloody angry, and who could blame them? In his latest insult to King Charles, Harry appears to have deliberately set the date at which he became a US resident as the same day he was turfed out of Frogmore Cottage. And with his status as an American resident now confirmed, his divorce from his country of birth is complete. So, the charming prince and the beautiful princess, Harry and Meghan, live happily ever after in their 16-bedroom ivory tower in Montecito, California. Or do they? Because it is one of the less controversial revelations in the book Spare that could ultimately do for the young prince. In full oversharing mode, perhaps keen to give his publishers some bang for their buck, he needlessly revealed his significant drug use. But were such revelations of drug use given when he applied for a visa to live in the United States? Being someone who has used drugs in the past is enough to see a US visa application swiftly cancelled. So, annoying and upsetting his family and his country of birth could be the least of Harry's worries. Donald Trump has said that if he wins the White House in November, Prince Harry is on his own and won't get any help. On Trump's watch, Prince Harry could see his visa revoked, which would likely see him return to the United Kingdom with his tail between his legs, which is why the outcome of the US elections is critical for the prodigal prince. This quote from my pal Tony Parsons, writing in his excellent column in today's Sun on Sunday, puts it brilliantly. Tony Parsons writes, a Joe Biden advisor asserted that under no circumstances would his administration ever deport the prince, no matter what fibs or omissions may have been on that visa application. He goes on to write, Trump makes no such promise, so Harry must hope it is Sleepy Joe and not Demented Don, who wins in November? Oh, too right. Donald Trump has made it a key election pledge to tackle the illegal border crossings in America. Well, if he wins later this year, he might be sending one particularly well-heeled and famous migrant back to his country of origin. Forget about stop the boats. Stop Harry and Meghan. Could they be returning to the UK with their royal tails between their legs? I'll get to your thoughts shortly. gbnews.com/your say. But first, tonight's top pundits. I'm delighted to welcome journalist and author Michael Crick, communications advisor and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, and Conservative peer in the House of Lords, Rayner. Well, there you go. Linda Jubilee. Prince Harry is feeling the heat, and he's brought this on himself.
Yeah, I think he does bring things upon himself. I just don't think he exercises enough judgment in most matters, and certainly not this matter. I've read the book Spare. I must say, I mean, I'm a former royal correspondent many years ago on Today newspaper, and when you read the book, it's almost like there's a kind of little story on every page, because royal correspondence exists on tiny crumbs in order to make a story. So I think the book's really, really interesting, but I think that's where it stops. He and Meghan cannot continue forever to make something out of their past history, their lives. They need to get into the real world and start doing a real job and producing real documentaries. And I don't think Meghan's latest setup in her sort of Riviera LA Orchard or whatever it's called is going to really cut the mustard. Once they get down to some real work, I think we'll be starting to make some progress on how the public views them.
Michael Crick, much ado about nothing?
I think it is, actually. It's what I call a candy floss story. A lot of ifs in it. It would be astonishing hypocrisy for Donald Trump, who's facing how many different kinds of criminal charge right now, to expel Prince Harry for a confession to something he did many years ago and, you know, effectively expel his wife, who is American on all counts. So this isn't going to happen. And if it does, please don't come back to Britain. Why don't they go and live in a remote part of New Zealand along with Liz Truss?
Michael, can I say one thing, though? You are, I think you'll agree, an egalitarian. So why should there be different rules for royals than ordinary members of the public? Because if you've found to have misled the authorities in a visa application and you're an ordinary person, you're out on your ear.
Well, is that true? I cannot believe that everybody who has ever taken drugs is always automatically expelled from the United States. And I'm sure there are well-paid and very expensive lawyers in America who would successfully argue the contrary case. I'm all for treating everybody equally, and if it is the case that everybody who ever confesses to taking any drugs in the past is automatically expelled from the United States, which I find surprising, if that is the case, then I suppose logic dictates that Harry should be expelled. But I just don't believe it'll ever happen.
Rayner, in the podcasts, in the Netflix series and in the books, Prince Harry is entitled to give his side of the story. And many would argue he was very courageous in revealing his issues with drugs. And he certainly doesn't make the case for being a drug user in Spare.
No, he doesn't. Look, I used to be and still have a bit of a soft spot for Harry. Then, as a nation, we used to have a soft spot. Obviously, everything that's happened in the last few years has dented that, damaged that view we had of this cheeky chappy.
That halo of red hair has slipped.
It absolutely has. But what he's become is a content producer in this modern parlance of, you know, what we need to have. And I've got this strange feeling that if Donald Trump looks at Prince Harry, he might see something familiar, because almost everything Donald Trump now does becomes content. It becomes blockbuster, you know, whether it's a court case, whether it's wrongdoings, whether it's, you know, cases against him, allegations. There's nothing that doesn't become content for the Trump machine. And it's sort of the model that Meghan and Harry are pursuing, that everything in their life becomes content production. So maybe there would be a meeting of minds here. What Hollywood is all about now is content. And if that makes dollar bills and everything else, then maybe they'll be on the same page.
Well, speaking of content, coming up, is Keir Starmer right to say that Labour are now the party of patriotism? And why are universities and a lot of institutions turning their backs on St George's Day, which is this week? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, Anne Widdecombe, and let me tell you, Anne's not happy. Plus, the papers are on their way. See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Squatters in London have taken over a pub which is leased by Gordon Ramsay, no less. The pub is currently up for sale with a guide price of £30 million. It is understood that Kitchen Nightmares host Ramsay called the police on Wednesday but was unable to have the squatters removed. The Metropolitan Police said in a statement they were made aware of squatters at a disused property but added, "This is a civil matter," and so police did not attend the property. Let's see what my panel make of this. Why can't we just boot squatters out? If we own a property or lease a property, why don't we just boot them out?
I know that's tempting, but the fact is, long-term empty properties have increased by 24% in the last 6 years. There's 1.2 million people on the social housing lists. People don't have a place to live.
What it does highlight is the enormous disparity in fairness in property laws in this country. It's just not fair that if you've worked all your life and invested some money in property because, you know, interest rates at zero and there's nowhere else to invest your money, and then suddenly somebody who's got no claim to that property and doesn't seem to have earned very much in life takes over your property. It's an outrage.
People shouldn't be squatting in other people's homes or commercial properties. But the fact is, until we sort the housing problem in this country, none of this is going to go away. The fact is, people my age won't be able to buy a home unless they've got a bung from their parents.
Yeah, but what's the practicality of this demonstration?
It's not a demonstration.
It's not going to free up more housing for people who are on the streets.
No, of course not. It's people looking to find a place to live. I don't think it's a demonstration at all.
It's an anti-wealth, anti-property-owning demonstration by people who've got nothing better to do in life than break into other people's property.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the show. It's very busy on the feedback front. Let me tell you, the way you communicate with the show is very different now. It is called gbnews.com/your say. Heaven help us if Harry returns to Britain, says Basil, especially if he's expelled from America. I hope he chooses to go to New Zealand. That is as far away as possible. OK, brilliant stuff. Keep that email feedback coming. But let's talk about the leader of the opposition now, our likely next Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who has been writing in today's Sunday Telegraph. He said that the Conservatives have lost any right to call themselves a patriotic party. Writing in the paper, he said the Tories don't care if division weakens our nation, if it strengthens their grip on power. They have denigrated some of our proudest national institutions. Well, he goes on to argue that Labour are now the party of patriotism. Is he right? Let's ask the vigorously patriotic former government minister and broadcaster Anne Widdecombe. Anne, are Labour now the party of patriotism?
No, and if you read that article, I mean, any sane person would just laugh out loud. I mean, one of the criteria that he applies is, he says that it's unpatriotic if you denigrate the big national institutions. Then he quotes to the BBC and the National Trust. Now, you know, and apparently if you criticise those, you're being unpatriotic. Now, that is the most incredible nonsense. And then he goes on to say that everybody cries woke and that this is undermining free speech. I mean, the reason that people oppose woke is because it undermines free speech. Yeah. I mean, it is the most ludicrous article. It looks as if it wasn't even written by an intern, because no intern would turn out such rubbish as that. And if that is Keir Starmer's own work, I mean, heaven help.
And Keir Starmer is clearly trying to love bomb disgruntled Tory voters by writing about patriotism in the Telegraph. Will it work?
No, there's only one truly patriotic party in this country at the moment, and that's Reform. And Reform isn't afraid to say that it's patriotic and that there's nothing wrong with patriotism. And Reform is the only one, you know, still really trying seriously to save the union. And I noticed one of the things that Keir Starmer said was, oh, you know, the Tories have weakened the union. Well, what exactly is his contribution be? And where does the patriotism come into it? If, as he did, he wanted to stay with Europe, he wanted us to be continued to be dominated and dictated to by a foreign power. The man's absolutely loony if he thinks that's patriotism.
Well, of course, Keir Starmer will argue that he will protect the union by destroying the SNP at the next election. But, of course, Anne, you're entitled to your view. I'd like to move on to... Go on, Anne.
Not just Scotland, is it, Mark? Have you ever heard of Northern Ireland?
Most definitely, and a very, very fair point indeed. Many, many viewers and listeners in Northern Ireland that watch the show, and I get emails all the time. Now, Anne, the Telegraph and the Mail are reporting that a traditional St George's Day celebration has been axed at Magdalen College, Oxford, for the second year in a row. You attended Lady Margaret Hall College in Oxford yourself. Why does the world of academia seem so ashamed of being English?
Well, I mean, on this occasion, it's Magdalen College. It's not the whole of Oxford University. But I rather suspect that if you did a survey, you would find there were more Magdalens than there were others, quite honestly. When you ask me why, it is exactly the same answer as, you know, the long march through the institutions and the institutional leftyism that now dominates our academic institutions. And it does. It does. I mean, they are almost automatically left-wing. You try being a normal, patriotic person saying, you know, that you like St George, you want to celebrate St George, you want to sing the national anthem, and they'll accuse you of being far right.
Well, it's a shocking, shocking state of affairs, isn't it? And the whole point is that we love the United Kingdom, but it's important, if you're in England, to love England too, because it is patriotism and a love of your country that binds our communities together.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, I always think of myself as a UK citizen. If somebody says, where are you from? I say the UK. I do, you know, the Union Jack, after all, is, you know, a unity of nations. So I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. But yes, of course, you know, I mean, look at how the Irish celebrate St Patrick's Day, and I'm talking about in the north as well as in the south. You know, you wear leeks on St David's Day in Wales. What's the matter with it? You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong, similarly, with waving a St George's flag.
Anne, why doesn't England love itself? England is one of the greatest nations in history. And I say that as the son of Irish immigrants.
I think Britain has, for many decades now, there's nothing new about this, just talked itself down. Always talked itself down. Look at the way we're apologising for empire when you think of some of the things that empire actually achieved. We never hear about that. We only hear about what people perceive as the downside. And so we talk ourselves down, and we should actually talk ourselves up. And I was rather hoping that post-Brexit, that's exactly what we would start to do. And it's worth pointing out that in one of the most successful schools in this country, the Michaela in London, which is run by Catherine Burblesing, they sing the national anthem there. Worth remembering that.
Most definitely. You've got to love your country. That is how you bring people together. That is how you have a successful nation. Look at the people of Ukraine, Anne. Examples are legion of communities that stick together and prevail. Now, Anne, oh, by the way, can I just a quick note on Magdalen College in Cambridge? I've got no doubt they would say that they are fiercely patriotic themselves. It is a great college and a great English university, and they will be waving the St George's flag. They'll be flying the St George's flag on their beautiful buildings on Tuesday, so there's no issues there. And can I finish with a shocking story in Scotland? And a prison governor, that's right, Anne, a prison governor has apologised to a double rapist called Isla Bryson after the trans sex offender complained about being misgendered. Now, Bryson was originally named Adam Graham and was convicted of raping two women but prior to his transitioning. Anne, you're furious about this. What do you have to say?
Well, if you actually remember, there was a proposal that she should actually go to a women's prison.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's still a he, and he's a rapist.
Most definitely. If you were still at the Home Office and prisons minister, we can but dream, how would you handle this? How would you handle this case if it was presented to you at your desk?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you don't put rapists in a women's prison, so that's the first thing. So there would never have been any question in my mind about putting Isla Bryson in a women's prison. And secondly, there are two genders. There are not 142 genders. And I'm afraid I probably would say to the governor, look, you are dealing here with a rapist. Don't apologise for tripping.
Anne, thank you so much. Of course, the prison's management would argue that they have to follow certain rules and regulations in regard to how people identify, what their pronouns might be, which would explain the apology. They simply want to acknowledge that the world is a changing place. But I think, of course, it's a place that's losing its mind, Anne. I think we agree on that one. I look forward to catching up in a week's time. Have a good one. My thanks to former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Next up, tomorrow's papers and full pundit reaction. But we've been asking you, in a special Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, is Sir Keir Starmer right that Labour is now the party of patriotism? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a drier end to the weekend for many of us today, it looks like change is on the way. An area of low pressure situated out to the north of the UK brings some weak frontal systems that will slowly sink their way southwards, particularly into the start of the new working week, and that area of high pressure we've seen pushes away towards the northwest. So a cloudy end to the day for much of eastern Scotland and northern England as that rain continues to sink its way southwards overnight, so quite a cloudy picture quite across the board into the early hours of Monday morning. But southeastern parts of England still holding on to some clearer skies, and we could even see some frost here, although not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain, and particularly across parts of Scotland holding up into the high single figures. So a cloudier start for many of us on Monday, particularly compared to what we saw over the weekend, and this rain continues to spread its way southwards through Monday daytime, not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a grey and damp day compared to the recent couple of days. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. I'm feeling warm here with highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely feeling much chillier across much of England and Wales under all that cloud and rain. That cloud and rain does eventually clear its way towards the southeast to start on Tuesday, so there will be some brighter spells, particularly for the northern half of the UK. Plenty of sunshine around through the morning. 1 or 2 showers bubbling up through the afternoon, particularly along some North Sea coastal regions, and staying quite cloudy in the southeast through the afternoon. Further showers on their way through Wednesday and Thursday, but hints of low pressure returning as we head towards the second half of the week.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, in another Mark Dolan Tonight People's poll, we've been asking, is Sir Keir Starmer right to say that Labour is now the party of patriotism? Well, it's a landslide, but not the right kind. 5.9% say yes, whilst 94.1% say no. The people have spoken. Well, it's 10:30, so Harry, let's do that thing. Let me tell you, the team have been over-delivering today. We've got Harry, we've got Mescana, we've got the brilliant Greg, and I'm delighted to say Jack as well. Dream team. The Sun newspaper is the first front page. Exclusive Vlad war. Russia hacks Brit whole jets. British holiday flights are being deliberately jammed by Russia, with aviation sources branding the tactic extremely dangerous. The electronic attacks force planes to swerve and dive to avoid bogus obstacles. Vladimir Putin's forces are suspected of being behind thousands of recent incidents involving BA and Ryanair jets. OK, next up, where should we go, Harry? We've got The Guardian now. PM faces calls to put Afghan concession in Rwanda bill. Rishi Sunak is under pressure to make last-minute concessions today to secure the passage of his Rwanda deportation bill by allowing exemptions for Afghans who served alongside UK forces. Menzies quits Tories after internal inquiry, and US aid vote shows the West will not abandon Kyiv. OK, next up, we've got the Daily Mail. What I discovered about the real Taylor Swift when I visited her £40 million home by her biggest superfan. And Jewish leaders call on Met chief to quit. Metro, reunited, Spice Girls singing together again. Guilty pleasures, that's in the Metro, of course, celebrating Victoria Beckham's 50th birthday. A radical plan as head reveals toll. 12-hour school day to stop phone addict kids. Pupils face a 12-hour school day until 7 p.m. under a head teacher's plan to break their 100% addiction to mobile phones. From tomorrow, they will have extra classes and a hot dinner instead of going home to their bedrooms and their phones. This is Andrew O'Neill, head of a top secondary school in West London. And last but not least, the Daily Star. An April miracle as it stops piddling down. How will we ever cope? Rain goes away. You'll get a shock if you go out tomorrow, as chances are it won't be raining for a change. And some forecasters reckon it'll stay that way, for a few days at least. So enjoy that dry weather. OK, let's get a full pundit reaction to the big stories of the day. I'm delighted to have TV legend Michael Crick, king of BBC Newsnight, latterly Channel 4 News, and now GB News and many other platforms. Michael Crick. We also have communications advisor and broadcaster, Fleet Street veteran no less, Linda Jubilee, and Conservative peer, former top advisor to Boris Johnson when he was popular and effective, Lord Coolvere Ranger. OK, folks, lots of stories to sink our teeth into. Look, I want to have a look at this story in The Sun, Linda Jubilee. Russia hacks Brit whole jets. OK, now this would sound like a pretty trivial story. The idea is that you got a Ryanair flight, EasyJet, and the pilot is swerving to avoid an imaginary threat. But this is a demonstration of just what a bad actor Russia is and what a threat to Western interests. Right, and what could happen? I mean, the worst could happen. It could, a jet could go down.
Well, there are suspicions that that has already happened in the past. So there's nothing to say that it can't happen in the future. And it's one of the things that I think is incredibly important that we pay attention to this. So it'll be interesting to watch how this rolls out in the next few months.
Coolvere, is this an affirmation of what the Americans have done in Washington, which is to further support Ukraine financially. Is this a reminder that Russia are a bad actor internationally and a threat to all Western interests?
Well, firstly, I'd want to say is I wouldn't want the general public to get too worried about this. If you're catching a flight tomorrow, you don't want to start worrying about what could happen to your plane.
Yeah.
We have been acutely aware of Russia and other actors like that, North Korea's involvement in cyber espionage for quite a long time. We have some fantastic services, the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK and others internationally working together to make sure we are protected from acts like this. But this is, as you say, Mark, a sign of those actors upping their game, looking for further vulnerabilities, whether it be in aviation, whether it be in our energy systems, whether it be in other parts that we could be technically vulnerable to, back doors into our system. So we do have to be conscious of it. We do have to be aware of it. But governments are working and focused on this activity.
Indeed, Michael Crick, AI, viruses, and computer hacking, drones. And now this sort of assault on an aircraft. This is the new warfare, isn't it?
It is. Cyber warfare. And, you know, the threat's been around for a long time. I mean, what astonishes me, actually, is that there haven't been more successful attacks by now. And my great fear is there'll come a point where everything goes down and we can't get money out. We can't get cash out. We can't pay for anything. The Russians and the Chinese are developing all of this, and I've no doubt we're developing it so that we can do it back to them. And, you know, lots of
Chinese.
Lots of work, yes, lots of work going on at GCHQ on this front.
Yeah.
But it's there is going to come a really nasty attack one of these days, and we're going to suddenly wake up to that it is a new form of warfare that affects us all as citizens.
I understand what you're saying, Michael.
But again, I'm not getting too frightened.
Yeah, because it's a constant thing.
Don't panic, Captain Mannering.
Don't panic, because it's a constant theme. And look, I worked for a business that helped protect the Olympic Games for the last 30-odd years. And it's the most cyber attack sporting event in the world. And you can see where the attacks are coming from. You know what they're doing. And so it's a constant trading of tactical blows. It won't happen overnight. So, you know, we won't wake up and suddenly everything... There's a gradual drip feed. And it's like a game of chess being played out in the cyber world. And we're always trying to stay one step ahead. So we must keep trying.
Well, I'm glad of your confidence. But, you know, people were confident, expressed similar confidence about, you know, the next pandemic, that there wouldn't be. And suddenly there was one which debilitated us in a huge way.
Yeah.
And this potentially could debilitate us much worse, because we would end up, the food supply is not turning up. And if everything goes down, which would be the worst kind of cyber attack, just think of how reliant we are on digital technology and everything, and how we are now a long way from the days when we all existed happily with none of this stuff.
Michael Crick, after a long political wrangle, the US House of Representatives has passed a long-delayed bill, £49 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Is this the right thing to do? Not everyone in Washington agrees.
I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think it's wonderful news, because the Ukrainians were in deep trouble because they didn't have the ammunition or the military hardware, and you know, there were signs that the Russians were making progress and the Ukrainians were on the defensive. It's going to take a while for this to feed through. But if we have to, as the West, we can't just say, OK, well, we'll support you for 18 months and now you're on your own. We have to stand by them.
But does this prolong the agony? Many people think this war is unwinnable, given the size of Russia's military and its size as a country in relation to Ukraine.
We have to hold them off in Ukraine. We, as the West...
Indefinitely? What's the timeline?
If necessary, indefinitely, because if they win in Ukraine, then the next threat will be to the Baltics, to Poland, and to the rest of Europe. And what, of course, really worries me is that if we have a Trump presidency, and he's made it clear that his commitment to Ukraine is a lot less than Biden's has been, and indeed his commitment to NATO.
I would agree with all of that, and add that the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has been doing a decent job as well, making sure that people, and in the US, recognise the damage that is being done to the Russian forces, the amount of the Russian fleet that is currently sitting at the bottom of the Black Sea. I think 10-20% has been damaged. The cost ratio, the cost to the Russian economy of continuing this war is significant. Russia has had to turn into a war economy. NATO has not. We are still in very single low-figure digits of the percentage of the budgets that we're using to fight this war. But as Mike says, we are in this war for the long term. We have to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. This is an existential crisis for the West if Russia thinks it can succeed for all the things Michael said and where they might go next.
Most definitely. Yvette Cooper writing in The Telegraph this evening, Linda Jubilee, says Labour will stop the small boats. Do you think anyone could take that sentiment seriously? Do you think that Labour, who are likely going to be our next government, will do more to tackle illegal immigration?
Well, that's laughable, isn't it, really, when you actually think about it? I mean, if the Conservative government is having such a great deal of trouble stopping the boats, why would Labour be able to do a more effective job? Why would
Michael Crick, do you think Labour could do a better job? Is that a convincing headline from Yvette Cooper?
Totally
Labour will stop the boats?
Totally unconvincing, unless Labour got some policy they've not announced yet that is somehow miraculously going to make a difference.
Impossible.
Difficult to know what that is. The two things they've said so far is they're going to stop criminal gangs. Yeah, likely story.
Good luck with that.
How?
Exactly. And second,
they
argue they will...
At the end of my street.
They argue that more European cooperation. Now, you know, Labour... traditionally more sympathetic to the EU, anti-Brexit on the whole. So maybe our European partners will be more sympathetic to a Labour government, but I doubt whether that will make a huge amount of difference.
Those two phrases are just that. They're just phrases. There's nothing underpinning them. I've spoken to senior police officers who tell me it is almost impossible to tackle these gangs at source. So how is anyone in the Labour Party going to stop these boats? The only chance we've got is if this bill goes through, which I assume it will, early this coming week, then we could go down that path. But even that might take a while.
Rwanda is expensive. It's flawed. It's riddled with legal issues. But if those flights take off, does that move the dial politically for the PM?
Yes, it does. And we're all hearing the arguments that Labour have been putting against the Rwanda bill and all the other issues that the government is trying to crack down on legal immigration. But we aren't hearing any solutions. And I think that's where, as Michael said, unless Yvette Cooper or Sir Keir Starmer have something up their sleeve that they really should have shared with the government and the British public now, because we have to deal with this.
But they'd argue this has happened on the Tories' watch and that the Tories have made a Horlicks of this and they will stop the boats.
Well, I think the issue has been more political than it has been about process. The Tories have been the government has been building a process saying this is what we want to do, and it's been the politics that has been holding this up. And I know you hear this line that the House of Lords is stopping. It's not the House of Lords, it's the opposition and the cross-benchers in the House of Lords. The government benches...
Well, they're raising very valid concerns.
Go on, Linda.
And I think that if there is some amendment that accommodates the Afghan people who supported the army and the British embassy officials, if something was done to actually support those people and to support that amendment, I think the bill would just go straight through.
I hear that comment, but the other one, which is about having an independent panel or body that could eventually ratify whether Rwanda is a safe country. This is against the diffusion of political power to unelected, unaccountable people to make a decision that the British public wants solved.
But even if the flights take off in June or July, the numbers of people on those flights will be tiny. When you've got 40,000 people a year, roughly, coming across in boats, you need to deport a significant, probably at least a third, or even a half, for that to act as a deterrent.
The estimate is it'll take 25 years.
But if it's only 100, how is that a deterrent?
But it's a deterrent that says that it starts that process of busting the marketing that these illegal... No, because they say to people, if you get across this border illegally, you'll be in Britain.
But hang on a minute. I've worked with Afghans, I've worked with asylum seekers, I've worked with evacuees, I've worked with refugees. I will tell you now, conclusively, that these people have told me this will not be a deterrent. The numbers are too small. That's me listening to them, not me repeating something.
The only thing I'll say is that the Home Office have done many reports and looked at other countries that have applied this exact process, and it has worked there.
Michael, you get the last word.
Well, it seems to me if you're only going to deport 1 or 2%, most potential migrants coming across the channel say, I'll take that chance.
Is it wild, as Sir Keir Starmer, to say that he'll axe the Rwanda plan even if it works?
It is rather. If the Rwanda plan was to work and we could be confident that Rwanda was a safe country...
Why would you?
I would endorse it. But I'm not confident it's a safe country, and I'm not confident it'll work.
OK, there you go. Listen, nothing to unpick there. We don't sit on the fence, do we? Not on Mark Dolan tonight. Well, listen, lots more to come, let me tell you. Got more front pages, including the Times and the Express, plus, in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, the leading travel firm who have gone against the government's advice to offer British Muslims package holidays in Iraq, Iran and Afghanistan. I'll be exposing that scandal next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
This new hate crime bill on women's issues, you think this is the least funny April Fool's joke in history?
Yeah, although the Scottish Government and the Scottish Police do seem to be trying to make a bit of a joke of it when, you know, their campaign Hate Hurts is fronted by a hate monster who's a sort of cuddly, bright red Muppet-style thing. And some of the things that Humza Yousaf said about it were from a soft play centre over the weekend. But yeah, it's really not a joke. It's not actually clever lawyers who know the wording of the law who enforce the law. It's the police. And the police have basically not been trained on this at all. There's a 2-hour online training course they're meant to have done, and lots of them haven't already done it. And we know from the way that the police have been talking about it that they're wildly overstretching what it might actually be to be, in particular, abusive, which is one of the words in the new law, and specifically on the issue of transgender identity. To claim that just noticing the fact that there are two sexes and that sex can't change is meant to be hateful, that, you know, even after years of trying to study it, I can't understand why people hold this belief. But it's part and parcel of a pattern of legal measures that the Scottish Government has either introduced or has sought to introduce. So it tried to introduce gender self-ID, but that was overruled by Westminster because it was out of the power of the devolved government. It's still attempting to bring in a conversion therapy law, which sounds nice but isn't nice. It actually criminalises proper ethical treatment of gender-confused youngsters. They're trying to say that men who have certificates saying that they're women count as women for a particular measure to do with public boards. And then this hate crime law, which tries to make it really difficult for someone to talk in a factual, reality-based, clear, understandable way about all these measures. It all adds up to a sort of an authoritarian attempt to deny the fact that human beings are mammals and come in two sexes, and that recognising that matters for women's rights especially.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
A quick look at tomorrow's front pages before a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive. And we've got the Times newspaper. Voters put police in the dock. Majority of Brits don't trust officers to solve crimes. Daily Express now, I think. And stop meddling. PM warns Labour it must pass the Rwanda bill. Next up, we've got the Mirror. And exclusive Labour leaders vow. Together for Stephen, Keir Starmer has vowed to honour Stephen Lawrence's legacy by ensuring all children get a chance to reach their full potential in life. Telegraph now, PM refuses to back under fire Met chief, and MOD hounds out free cigarettes to Ukrainian troops training in the UK. And Foreign Office went against the Rwanda plan is the other headline. OK, folks, lots of front pages there, but we need to get to a Mark Dolan exclusive. We can reveal that a travel company is advertising to British Muslims for holidays in places like Iraq, Iran and Taliban-governed Afghanistan. The tours are offered despite the UK government warning of all travel to these destinations is a bad idea. For Afghanistan, Foreign Office advice reads as follows. You should not travel to Afghanistan. The security situation is volatile. Travel through Afghanistan is extremely dangerous and border crossings may not be open. There is a heightened risk of British nationals being detained in Afghanistan. If you're a British national and you're detained in Afghanistan, you could be facing months or years of imprisonment. And the FCDO's ability to help you is extremely limited, and support in person is not possible in Afghanistan. Now, we've approached the travel agency for comment several times since Thursday, but as yet, no response. Now, Fiaz Mughal, who was the government's anti-Muslim hatred czar, appointed by Michael Gove last month, but withdrawing after being targeted by extremists, has expressed concerns about the advertisement of this travel firm. He told my producers that travellers could potentially be kidnapped, threatened or exposed to extreme rhetoric. Well, I'm delighted to say that Fiaz Mughal joins me now. Mr Mughal, thank you very much for appearing on Mark Dolan tonight. This is not a package tour to Tenerife or Torremolinos, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. And how bizarre is this set of package tours? I mean, taking individuals into the heart of areas where there are extremist groups and extremist rhetoric, as if it's a little tour around Torremolinos, is frankly a joke.
How did you unearth this?
Actually, it's interesting because I had subscribed to this very firm around Andalusian tours, so a lovely little Andalusian history tour. And then suddenly I got this little ping in saying, you know, we have package tours to Afghanistan, at which point I thought, my God, is this a joke? And it clearly wasn't a joke. But it's really quite perverse given the nature of extremism and some of the issues clearly around the Taliban and its extremist rhetoric. So very troubling indeed.
There is no evidence that the travel agency involved has a sinister motive. They do trips to Europe as well. So what is the problem?
Well, I think the problem is probably the fact that because there is some kind of heritage and cultural background clearly in Afghanistan, that they think now is the time to take British Muslims over. Well, clearly they've got that and judged this very wrongly. Now is not the time. Until the Taliban are in power, nobody, no British Muslim, no British individual should enter Afghanistan. Mark, you know, let's not forget, the Taliban killed our soldiers. The Taliban were the people we were fighting for 2 decades. The Taliban take Islam, which is I'm a Muslim myself, take Islam and make it the most brutal form of repression for women, minorities, and any other people in their country who don't subscribe to their view of their religious fundamentalism. These are brutal individuals.
Mr Mughal, let's bring in my top pundits tonight, Lord Coolvere Ranger, Linda Jubilee and Michael Crick. And the issue, my concern, Mr Mughal, is that it's not only the safety of Brits abroad, possible kidnapping, brainwashing, you name it, it's also an issue of national security at home.
That's right. It absolutely is an issue of national security. Just imagine somebody who has sympathies to the Taliban going over and making connections. Let's also say, just imagine they go in that environment and become influenced by individuals or told to carry money back for certain things. This is a national issue around our safety, sovereignty and security. Nobody should be entering Afghanistan.
Only a few seconds left. Michael Crick, it's very lucky that Fiaz Mughal has unearthed this.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what the travel agencies say. And it may be, I suppose, that there might be parts of some of the countries that they're doing these tours that are more safe than others. But on the other side, the cost to us as a state is potentially great. Not only is, if something goes wrong, people in the Foreign Office have got to get them out. That could then involve political deals, maybe us having to make concessions of one kind or another.
Yeah.
All sorts of problems.
A couple of seconds left. Coolvere, briefly, if you can.
Yeah, a hugely challenging issue. This has to be addressed, I think. We have to look at... The guidance is clear. It's dangerous to go there. You shouldn't be going there. So, really, we've got to see what's this travel agency
Linda,
is offering.
it's mad that this is allowed, briefly.
Absolutely. as far as I know, there are no real diplomatic relationships being built with the Taliban to start with. And let's not forget, this is a country where less than 3 years ago, people were selling their kidneys to raise money to feed their children.
Extraordinary.
That's where we're going.
Fiaz Mughal, do please join us again in the future, and thank you so much for unearthing this troubling story. My thanks there to the government's former anti-Muslim hate czar, Fiaz Mughal. Thanks to my brilliant pundits tonight, always great company. And most importantly, for you at home, watching on telly, listening on the radio, I'm back on Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a drier end to the weekend for many of us today, it looks like change is on the way. An area of low pressure situated out to the north of the UK brings some weak frontal systems that will slowly sink their way southwards, particularly into the start of the new working week, and that area of high pressure we've seen pushes away towards the northwest. So a cloudy end to the day for much of eastern Scotland and northern England as that rain continues to sink its way southwards overnight, so quite a cloudy picture quite across the board into the early hours of Monday morning. But southeastern parts of England still holding on to some clearer skies, and we could even see some frost here, although not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain, and particularly across parts of Scotland holding up into the high single figures. So a cloudier start for many of us on Monday, particularly compared to what we saw over the weekend, and this rain continues to spread its way southwards through Monday daytime, not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a grey and damp day compared to the recent couple of days. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. I'm feeling warm here with highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely feeling much chillier across much of England and Wales under all that cloud and rain. That cloud and rain does eventually clear its way towards the southeast to start on Tuesday, so there will be some brighter spells, particularly for the northern half of the UK. Plenty of sunshine around through the morning. 1 or 2 showers bubbling up through the afternoon, particularly along some North Sea coastal regions, and staying quite cloudy in the southeast through the afternoon. Further showers on their way through Wednesday and Thursday, but hints of low pressure returning as we head towards the second half of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any